Hello, I'm Trevor.
And I'm Laura.
We have a deep passion for helping couples build strong, lasting relationships that truly thrive.
So we created Tools for Marriage.
Tangible, practical tools couples can start using right away.
Wherever you are in the world,
And wherever you are in your relationship.
we truly believe these tools can improve any marriage.
And maybe we put a few divorce lawyers out of business along the way. So hello, welcome to the Tools for Marriage podcast.
Well, thanks for having us.
So why don't you introduce yourself, you these strangers here who have arrived at our home to do this podcast?
Well, my name is Brent Black, and I happen to be Trevor's father.
Okay.
and,
Nice.
and now she can introduce herself.
Okay. All right.
I'm Darene Black, and I'm your mother, and your mother-in-law.
Okay. So Darene spelled, how do you spell it?
Darene.
Okay. So I remember when we were kids and we went and ordered at some restaurant and you went up to the counter and you placed the order and they said, name please. And you said, Sue.
Sue.
Yeah. And I looked up, I thought, what in the world? Who is Sue? So we're walking away. I'm like, Sue, who's Sue? I thought your name was suddenly Sue. And you're like, if I say Darene, they're going to spell it wrong. They're going to say it wrong. So they would just go with Sue, you know?
You're
So
right.
you just went
Yeah.
with Sue. So,
I just-
yeah.
And a lot of times she'll say, it's Darene. It's like daring, but I'm not.
Oh,
It's good. I like
Darene.
that. And she goes, yeah, she's not.
Yeah.
That's right. Really.
Wouldn't you say that you are daring because you go on these adventures? You've been on cruises to
true.
foreign lands. You've been to Peru and Tahiti. Is that not adventure?
I'm not an adventurous person.
No?
No.
So, but
I'm not shy, but I'm not adventurous.
Right.
Like, jump off a cliff.
yeah,
But-
right. But if someone says, go to some Tahiti, for example, and swim with dolphins or something, you say yes. So to me, I
Yeah.
would say that borders more daring than less. No.
Really?
You
I
don't
don't
think
think
so?
that's very
Okay.
And also, she says, I'll like to be there with the dolphins, but I'm not sure I'm interested in the journey. And I said, oh, I like the journey.
Getting
There and all the things that might happen that will be unusual. And she says, no, I want everything pretty well planned out, and I'll know when I get there, and I want to know the day I'm swimming as a dolphin.
That's right. And what
Okay.
time?
Yeah, that's correct.
that's me
Hey,
too.
so that always been the case since you got married, that she's kind of wants to know where we're going and what we're doing and when we're going to arrive, and you've always been like, let's just
Wing it.
go. Let's just okay.
And it took me a while to figure out that we were different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that I need to make sure that she knows, no, she doesn't necessarily like surprises.
Yeah.
She would prefer to know that we're going to this place and we're going to be there at this time and
Yeah.
we're going to do this thing,
Right.
Yeah.
rather than just surprise
The
her with.
surprises. Yeah.
Even though you were in the trunk.
Yes.
Okay, let's tell
Yes.
this story.
Okay, all right.
Let's tell this story. Yes.
So and correct me where I have the facts wrong,
Okay.
but when you got married,
Yep.
you were going to go down to the Broadmoor in
Right.
Colorado Springs, which is a
Right.
beautiful hotel,
Right.
coming down from a Denver area, from
Yeah,
Littleton, right? And then your mom suggested like a different place.
Right.
And so, much to your chagrin, you chose the other place.
Right? It
And-
was less expensive.
Broadmoor, which is very expensive.
Yeah. So you went to this other place, and you said that this place was not a nice place. There
Okay.
wasn't even a bathroom in your
It's right
room.
down
Down
the hall. Now, you're just first married.
Yeah.
This is your
Your honeymoon.
Yes, yeah.
And you walk down the hall to a bunch of old people sitting around a television.
Yeah.
And you walk past them.
Like you went to an old folks home.
You walk right.
Okay.
This was the Glenmore Springs original hotel that
Okay.
was outside the hot springs.
Built in the 1880s.
Yeah.
There was, you walked in the door, there's a bed and a little gap between, and there was it. And, there
And a
was no
radiator. One
Yeah.
of those old
For the
metal
bathroom.
radiators.
Right.
And there's no bathroom. And
Yeah.
you're like,
Where's-
okay, so you walk down, to do your little nighty thing.
Yeah, you're trying to. Yeah, yeah.
There's all these old people, and it was,
Yeah.
And when we walked out, just to tell you, it was $6.
Oh, that's not a bad deal.
That's
Yeah.
good.
You went to Glenmore.
I'm just saying. I know it wasn't the perfect situation, but you've
That's
always
a
been
good deal.
frugal.
I've been frugal.
Yeah,
Not
that's
cheap,
right.
as she says, but
Right.
frugal. That's right.
Yeah.
And I've inherited, I think, the frugal
Right.
trait, which I think can sometimes be
It's,
a little
uh,
bit
yeah.
of contention. That
So we see that a lot of times with couples. I mean, most of the time, there's a spender and there's a saver.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you get two savers or two spenders, which is really
Yeah.
interesting. And so there, throughout
Yeah.
marriage, it is kind of a difference.
Or to
Well,
navigate.
that
And
was
navigate.
we
Yeah.
were just talking. I mean, thinking about it. I'm a saver also.
Yeah.
I don't. We don't spend huge amounts, so it's
Right.
not exactly.
Yeah.
Now, there are times when I say, especially now in our older age, and we have some money that
Yeah.
we can deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little more, but I would say we're both very, very conservative.
Right.
But
Because we
she
both
would
have
like-
single moms.
That's
and
right.
she would like to go shopping, and she says, I want to know where it is in the store,
Mm.
and I want to go in, I want to get that item, and I get out of there.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to go up and down the aisles and see what's in the store that
No,
I
it's a good deal.
and get a
Yeah.
good deal.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily looking for the best price, but I am looking for the best deal.
Yeah.
The low, a big, I'll take a big discount off of something versus just, even though the price may be the same.
Yeah.
Oh, I got 60% off because I bought it on Wednesday.
Yeah,
That's
right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So the $6 you save money. So then the continuation of that story is, I guess from maybe both of your perspectives, that didn't work out so well.
Correct.
So then how long have you been married now? How long?
It'll be 59 years the end of January.
59, coming up on 59 years.
Congratulations.
Okay. So what anniversary was this? Do you remember?
25th.
The 25th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So for the
25th is going to
25th,
be a special.
right. So
Yeah.
you decided for the 25th, I'm going to go take her to the Broadmoor. Now you live in Utah, so it's not down the road from
Right.
you. So you're like going to fly there, and you're going to rent a similar car to what you were driving at the time you had driven to the hot spring.
Truck.
Told
Yes.
my secretary, you can't, if you can find me a blue Corvette, do it.
Okay.
But if you can't, then at least get a blue car that's like a Corvette.
Yeah.
And she says, okay, I'll do what I can. And she got us a blue Dodge or something.
Okay. All right.
Some compact out.
Yeah. So because is that what you were driving at the time? You had a blue Corvette,
I had a blue
Yes.
56 Corvette.
and that was a convertible. Or-
It was.
Oh, okay. Was this a convertible? Was she able to get you a blue convertible?
No.
or-
No.
Okay. Okay. So then, but January in Colorado, maybe you don't want a convertible.
That's correct.
Is that okay? So then, to add to that, then you wanted to surprise her with this whole thing, which I get the sort of frugal get a deal thing. I got it. The surprises, I got it. I
Yep.
like
I don't-
all
I
the
don't like
surprises.
surprises.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so then you decide I'm going to recreate this, and so you're trying to surprise her as far as you possibly can
Correct.
before she realizes this is what's happening.
Right.
And so part of that surprise was I was in on it. You said,
Good.
"Hey, why don't we pretend like I'm going on a work trip,
Right.
and Mom will drive the car with me down
Right.
to the airport?" But then you're saying, "But how do I get the car back from the airport? Well, how
Right.
do we do that or whatever?" And I said, "I'll ride in the trunk." And then we'll get to the airport, and then you guys can leave, and I can jump out of the trunk and drive the car home because I
Right.
was over 16 at the time,
Right.
whatever. And so you're like, it's a great plan, right?
Okay, and one quick thing.
Yeah,
One
okay.
quick thing. So he's asking, they're both asking me, well, what does she want to pack? What does she
Yeah,
want
what
to
can we
wear?
bring?
What makeup?
I couldn't get my secretary to do that, so I wanted somebody.
Right.
So I'm in, and I'm like, I don't know. So we're kind of like
Asking,
planning.
what does she wear? I don't
What
know.
makeup
What
does
does she
she-
make up? Yeah.
So anyway, she comes home early, and I'm
Just
in you
walking
guys'
out.
I'm in you guys' bedroom.
Get through the closet. She runs out.
I'm like, like, what is she doing? So anyway, that was the night before.
Okay.
the bag was like, you kind of got it, but not out of the room.
Right.
So you're like,
Yeah, because it was-
I hid the bag in the room, in behind all the clothes and stuff like that. So sometime in the middle of the night, you need to come get the bag and get it into the car because I don't want to be picking up the bag
Yeah.
in the morning and spoil the
Right.
surprise. So at 2, 3 in the morning, whatever, I come walking into your bedroom and I get the bag out and I start walking out, and you wake up. What are you doing? And I'm like, I need this for drama class or something like that. And I take the thing and I get it in the car, and then I sneak around the house, and Dad and I have this little plan while I'm in the car. He's like, how am I going to know if you're in there? And I said, you tap on the thing and I'll tap back. And if I tap back, I'm in there. So he comes out and he taps and I tap back and he thinks, okay, he's in there. So then you get in the car, you're driving him to work. Now, were you suspect at all about what was
No,
going on?
and worse, I'm in a zip, just a regular
Not
workout
necessarily wanting to go to fly.
travel?
to
Yeah.
travel. That wasn't so bad. They at least matched.
Yeah. Okay.
Get to the airport.
So, well,
Kiss it goodbye.
You wait, but along the way, you guys are driving, right? I'm in the trunk, and I have a little gift for you. That was my little surprise, some little gift. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, you guys are driving and you're talking, right? and you start talking about us.
Oh,
And so Dad cranks up the radio because I'm in the trunk, right? So that I won't hear whatever you guys are saying about it. Those rotten kids, whatever it was, you know. So Dad's cranking up the radio so that I don't hear your private conversation, essentially.
oh, I had, yes.
And so then you guys make it to the
So new
airport or
story.
whatever, and he comes around and then he pops the trunk basically, and I. Mom is like, you in the trunk and my luggage, and you didn't know what was going
I
on.
know.
So then he.
And we still didn't even through the airport
Okay.
until you know where the plane's going.
Oh.
You don't know where you're
Oh,
going.
well, so did
He
you?
doesn't say Denver to me.
Yeah,
Just
Back
we're going.
then, you could go all the way to the gate with a guest, essentially, just not on the flight.
Right.
When did you know you were getting on the plane? Because you
Yeah.
now had your suitcase, I
Right,
guess.
and
And so,
we're going on a trip,
Oh, okay.
obviously. But
and so now you're like, I don't.
so where are we
Yeah.
going?
Right,
You know.
yeah.
She's
And,
probably thinking Tahiti,
Yeah.
Hawaii, taken to Denver.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
So long as the airport's still open with the weather there, we're going to go to Denver. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you guys made it. You got your blue car at the airport, and then you drove her over to the Broadmoor. So at what point did you like realize, oh, we're kind of doing the right way, if you will, right?
yeah, about there. But first, we drove around all over Denver, where
Yeah.
we got married, the
Oh,
church,
okay.
we
Went
got
to the
married,
church.
and all
Got
that,
married.
because you can't check in
Yeah.
until.
Did you
such
fly
a
to
time.
DIA then, and then
Yep.
go to Little? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then on the way back, we were gonna. I didn't know, but we were gonna go on the train to Glenwood Springs,
Oh, that's
where
right.
we
Oh, yeah.
did go
Actually,
on our honeymoon.
Okay.
And
cool.
But the hotel was condemned by then, so I couldn't stay in the room. We were,
It probably should have been condemned back
Right,
then,
right.
but
and it finally got condemned. So
You're
we,
like, oh, wait, I still have $6. Is there any way?
in fact, I think I paid more to get in the pool
Yeah.
after 25 years than I did for the
Right.
room and the pool from the
Right.
Yeah.
So you stayed somewhere else in the area, and you went to the
right
hot
behind it,
springs.
there it was, what actually
Now they
called
had
the hot springs.
Yeah.
with
right
with your own
behind it.
bathroom and everything.
Yeah.
It's fancy.
gosh. But
Um,
and I think the clothes I picked out, the makeup was, you said, I mean, things didn't match. It was the whole trip. She was kind of like, it didn't quite work.
But it was, and then we took the train after that all the way back
To Salt Lake.
to Salt Lake,
Yeah.
which is a very long. We went from the train from Denver up to
Oh,
Glenwood
you didn't have a
Springs, and then
first-
to
and-
A
Denver.
flight back. You did a one way
Yeah.
to
And-
Denver, and then a
And
train.
just as my mom had messed up the first time we went,
Yeah.
this time we said, okay, Mom, we're going to this train station. And she says, okay, well, I've got to take my car back to, turn the blue rental car in.
Oh, okay.
So you can meet us at the train station with the luggage. And she said, okay. So we get to the train station. She misses the exit, goes somewhere, and never shows up. So we don't have
Have
any
to get on the
luggage.
train.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that part. It was-
So
We had to get on the train
Yeah.
and go anyway because we had the tickets, whatever. And so, anyway, she did get the luggage there the next day
we
on
got
the
it
train.
to the other train.
So
and
we got,
and we got
to
it the
get
next
our
day.
luggage, but
Yeah,
it's
okay.
just, it really wasn't her fault. He took a, oh, there's the exit. And you have to get over 2 lanes, and you know what I'm
I
saying?
see.
So it was
All
really,
So overall, are you like appreciative of that? The intent behind surprises and everything.
oh yeah. I mean,
okay.
it's,
Yeah.
it's hard at the beginning. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know where you're going. You
Yeah.
don't know what you're doing.
yes.
But afterwards, it was an adventure you can talk about. But
Right.
whether or not
During it, it's funny now.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
How many years later? Yeah. yeah.
And
Probably
we've
more
done a
funny.
number of those with Tron, our other son.
Yeah.
And he is the adventure journey people. And we go out and she is just saying, what in the world are we doing here? And we're in
Yes.
this car that doesn't have any mufflers and
Yeah.
it's blowing up in the middle of the thing and we're not going to get back to our boat. But then afterwards she says, well, that was a story we remember.
That's true. Yeah.
Memory.
It's a good outlook on it. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it was, but I'm not adventurous.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
So you mentioned Tron, so
Right.
that's my older brother.
Right.
And then I'm Trevor, and he's
Right.
Tron Wade, TW,
Yep.
right? And excuse me, he's Tron
Trevor
Wesley.
Wesley.
Tron Wesley. Trevor Wade.
Wade.
So TW.
Yeah.
And so I understood that the idea came from that was
That was,
week
we week that was.
A week that was. Was that a movie or a book?
TW3. It's a TV
No,
program.
I think
Okay.
it was a TV,
TV
program.
program. Okay.
And I don't know what
TW3.
it was
So our
about.
third son
Yeah.
is supposed to be a TW3.
Right. Okay.
And then by this time we have accepted the Lord, and now we're saying,
okay.
well, wait a minute, our third son should have something to do with the Lord.
Yeah.
So I think Darene came up with.
You found it in-
I found it in the Bible, and it says
There's Titus.
It's-
There's like Timothy. There's other
Michael?
biblical
No, wait, we
things.
learned that
We
you
learned
don't
that
do that
Leo-
to your children.
Yeah.
Don't.
Not after we had 2 TWBs.
Oh, okay.
You really don't want your children to all have the same initial.
or she didn't. So I was fine with it. But
I don't think it's fair.
Lael, translated is he is God's. Lael
He
is
is
he is
God's.
God's.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's what we named him.
Okay.
And then he probably would have preferred a Timothy or a
Timothy.
Titus.
Yeah.
He probably does the same thing when someone asks the name.
Yeah,
It's like,
He says
oh,
two. So Josiah is his middle name.
Right.
What does Josiah mean? Where does
Josiah in the Bible is one of the only kings that was good
I
with
see.
God at all. Totally.
He says we're gonna find the Bible and we're gonna read it to all the people.
oh.
And so Josiah was
He was
was a
the
great
only
king.
one of the kings that came out in the end that you would say, that was a good king. You know?
Right.
He did neither right nor left from God.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say to couples that are approaching marriage or in the early part of their marriage, from the things that you guys have navigated together in terms of your different, styles and preferences and things like that, and serving the Lord together over all these years? And what type of things would you offer to the sort of the next generation as they think about?
I was thinking about that a lot
Yeah.
after you asked. And one of the things, of course, is there's no way, I think, knowing the Lord is our first change of heart and lives.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long our families, we had single divorced moms, pretty much everybody in our
alcoholic fathers.
alcoholic fathers,
Yeah.
pretty much in our whole sphere of people. I would say there was very few people that we knew that were actually married. I don't think we sat around and contemplated it. We
Yeah.
weren't big on that, kind of thing. But so that's the first thing, is accepting the Lord. The second thing, I think, is Brent always says to me, love is a decision.
Mm.
It's not a feeling. We think,
Yeah.
oh, I don't feel like I love you anymore. And of course, on days you don't feel good and you don't feel like it's a loving day.
Mhm.
You're not very friendly. You're not very nice. But it's a decision to stick it out. So I would think love is a decision.
Yep. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. That was a decision he made. And he sent Jesus for that reason. So
Yeah.
that's a decision.
Yeah.
And then one of the things I think that was different from our perspective, Brent had decided in watching his family, and probably in our family too, but my dad wasn't around a long time, so was that money is always an issue. So Brent decided, of course, after we ended up having a little money, we didn't have it in the beginning. So he handed me a quarter once to get gas on the way home to my mother's house. And it dropped him off at work, and I had a quarter. And that's all the money I had.
But
I
gas
pulled
is
into
only
a sta-
29 cents a gallon.
Yeah, I pulled into the gas station, and the man I gave him a quarter, and he gave me 33 cents worth of gas.
Oh, wow.
I was so blessed. I made it to my mother's house. But anyway, that's a whole different ballgame. But I think he decided that in the end, that the money, not the big money that, whatever, but the money is my problem. Here's all the money, buy the groceries, do whatever you want to do.
Right.
And he never criticized whether or not you bought this outfit or this paid the bill. Because now when you're in charge, you have to have the electric bill paid. If you're expecting him to pay the electric bill, you might buy some outfits you don't need. But when you have to pay it,
Yeah.
the water bill, the electric bill, the house payment, the insurance, it was like, I can't buy out that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
outfit or whatever.
And was that a way that you were trying to reduce friction around that particular area that can cause friction? Or was it a heart thing where you realized because you're frugal and you want to,
No.
I read the Bible and it said it's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the
the
love
love
of
of money.
money that's
Yeah.
the root of all evil. So if you can give up that love of money,
Mhm.
then it kind of
Friction.
goes away
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
you know.
And I think probably your mother and stepfather fought about money.
Mm.
So it was like, we can
Yeah,
fight.
my
you
money
can
is my money, your money is your money.
Right.
You can't spend my money, I can't spend your
Right.
money. I says it's just money, you know.
Yeah.
And because I didn't work,
Mhm.
if he said, "Oh, I can only give you this much money," it
Yeah.
makes you feel lesser,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
here's all the money, you do it,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that was
It helped.
Yeah.
helped keep friction.
When did you feel like that was like right off the bat or
Well, it couldn't be right off the bat.
Oh, okay.
He worked at a grocery store. He knew much what the prices were. I'd never even bought groceries
Yeah.
before, so
Yeah.
it was like he would go, okay,
King
hamburgers
Soopers-
on sale.
King Soopers has a sale for this much
So I
money.
think it was after we moved
Yeah.
to Pennsylvania where the check was, but during
Right.
college, when he
Yeah.
was in college, it was like, I know where the only thing we did was buy food,
Right.
really. So he
Yeah.
knew what to buy at the grocery
Yeah.
stores. And I'm like, I don't know how much things were.
Right.
But after we moved to Pennsylvania, because he's working shifts, it was like, you have to do all that stuff.
Right.
So it was
Right.
pretty much money goes, here's the money,
Yeah.
And then the big one for me is the one that's in Genesis. It's not good for man to be alone.
It's true.
And so that's probably, that's the decision God made. And that's true. It's not good for us to be alone. So
Mhm. We see that. I mean, I think that we're on the prayer ministry and things, and people are alone. Do you know? And I think that that's so difficult to be isolated. And God didn't create us like that.
Nope.
They created for relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when you're by yourself, you go, "There's something wrong with me. There's
Right.
something wrong with me." And then when you get around other people and they go, "Oh, you too, and how did you get through that?" And so I do think
in your previous podcast, the guy said, you have value.
Mm. Yeah.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Yes.
has value.
That's
We're all made in God's image.
Mhm.
Everybody has value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you put in place early in your marriage that you said, "Hey, we want to continue to go on dates together, or we want to, if we get in a conflict, we're gonna call a timeout," or like any little things
we
that you
don't
guys?
think that deeply.
Well,
I got one, and I don't know exactly where I got it from,
Yeah.
but it basically said the best thing that you can do for your kids
Mhm.
is love their mother.
Mm-hmm. And you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's what I really love about you guys is you guys do adventure. You guys are friends. It really is a testament to us where you do go, "Oh, how do marriages work?" And the two of you guys do things
I don't even
together.
think about what we're we're not
Mhm.
we don't sit down and write down all of our problems or
Yeah.
anything like
But I
that.
think
And-
that's Christ in the center.
yeah,
Oh,
but
Yeah.
it wasn't in the beginning because we didn't have Christ, and
Yeah.
so I don't know. My brain always worked well. If this doesn't work out, one day we'll just get a divorce because
Mm.
that's what my
what you
family had done.
Yeah.
I don't think
I
he
never
had
thought
thought
that.
that.
Mm.
You decided.
He had decided,
Yeah.
even without Christ, that he had decided.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember when I was a kid, you guys didn't argue much. You still don't argue much, right?
yeah,
But you must have decided at some point that if we're going to discuss something or we're going to do away from the kids rather than in front of the kids.
Yeah.
Where some people don't do that, just fight out loud, whatever. And so I remember you guys like having a little terse conversation, which I had never seen. And so
you were really upset.
Oh, mortified, because suddenly it was like you're fighting, you're clearly getting a divorce, and you were like, "Baby, we have a little conflict, we work it out, we talk it out, and we move on." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But because I didn't like sort of
See me yelling, screaming all the time, and
or the patching up. This is what it looks like, or whatever. The whole thing seemed foreign to me,
Right.
So I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting.
I think another thing you taught me is let kids be kids and let adults deal with adult things.
Right.
And
Not bringing them
not
the adult
bringing-
problems of
Yes.
money or finances or concerns
Yes.
about politics or whatever. It's like, let them be kids, you know.
No, I wish we could let the kids be kids a lot longer than they are
Yes.
nowadays.
Yeah.
Because they're just, and I do think the kids that are coming up now, I don't know what age there's in this middle. I think they're more sensitive to, uh, like I will see McKenna and Colton and those guys. I think they really are, those particular ones are going to be very good at, they're both involved with their children and are going to make sure their children don't get overly connected with the world as much as you can do.
Right.
I know that it's very hard to do that,
Yeah.
but I think they're more likely to see what's kind of happened and what they're going to do about it. They're more stronger at,
And they don't let their kids play one against the other, so and that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. We didn't do that either. I don't think the kids ever ask you for something
Right.
to get around to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like,
A united front.
yeah, or just go ask your mom because I'm not dealing with it or
Right.
something.
Makes sense.
But it's never been like, oh, sure. Now maybe if we had a little girl.
Oh, or he's like, whatever.
Daughter, you should see him with it.
Yes.
Yeah, with Lucy and with Ariel and
Yeah.
McKenna and Sierra.
Yeah.
They were a little bit different than you guys were, but that's also grandparents.
Yeah, sure.
It's
Different
not
role.
just.
No.
A kid, I mean,
Yeah.
you're a parent, you
Yeah.
are responsible, and I think for grandkids, like, oh, I just get to
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
They
crying
can't
and
have
stuff.
candy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
That's right.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry about
Give
that.
them the candy, wind them up and send them home.
That's right. Yes.
So then growing up in a household with 3 boys, that was probably a bit of a challenge, I would think, right? So tell me a little bit about what that was like in either the early years or the middle years or the
You
later
mean with
years.
raising the 3 of you, or
Yeah.
for me growing up
Oh,
with 3
that's right,
brothers?
because you had 3 brothers, right?
right.
So you're like, oh boy, here we go again. Essentially, right? Bunch of kids making dumb choices,
Yeah.
right?
Bouncing off the wall.
Yeah, okay.
So
Either, I suppose. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, the boys are after having granddaughters, great.
that's right.
They are so different. You sit
Yeah.
at the table and you make cookie dough, or
The
you just
connection and the
it's
verbal
just,
and
and boys are generally bouncing off the walls. We would come home and find you guys had, footprints on the
Yeah,
walls,
why are there
or
footprints?
walking up on top of the kitchen cabinets, or you've been hiding the dryer, you went down the laundry chute,
Yeah.
or you jumped on a mattress to.
Somebody said, we saw Lil fly up above the
All right, we gotta tell
roof
this
of your
story.
house. And we said,
That was a pretty good
what? And they said, oh yeah. And then you finally told us that you took an old air bed and put Lil on it. And then you both jumped off the porch and popped him on it.
It worked out pretty good. They do that a lot inside of like lakes and things like that. We just did it in the backyard,
Right.
and we launched Whale.
Somebody must have caught him, I guess.
Well, I
because-
think what happened is Tron sort of had the idea, but as Lale was kind of coming down, he thought, this is going to hurt. And so last minute, we all kind of pulled back, and he hit pretty hard. When you hit, and you...
the mattress, please tell me.
No, he hit on the
He did.
lawn.
He hit
That's
on the lawn,
what he
came back
told me.
on the lawn. I'm surprised nothing was broken because he was really. Jim was walking down to our house and he sees Lale up above the house and he's like flailing in the air or whatever. So that was an adventure. So,
Yeah.
all right. So raising boys was a bit of a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember one thing that I thought was funny. I remember, Dad, you worked as an engineer, right? And you would always play cards during lunch, right? And so when you'd come home to talk to Mom, he'd say, how'd it go?
I won 17 cents.
Right. And so he would talk about his card winnings or losings as to how. So Tron thought you just played cards for work.
Yeah.
But how do you explain
Yeah.
engineering?
Right. That's
To
true.
any child.
I
I
to me,
still don't know.
I
Right.
know, yeah.
So how do you explain that? I went to work and I engineered.
Yeah. Right.
As a doctor, you can explain it. A
Yeah.
fireman, you can explain. How do you explain? Now, we all need it, obviously, in our lives,
Yeah.
with engineering, but how do you explain it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know you guys thought that you just played cards for a living.
Right. Right. And so how long did you work, and were you at the same company the whole time that you worked as an engineer?
It's only
No, I graduated from Colorado School of Mines with the chemical engineering degree, with a professional degree in refining. So I got 11 job offers from all these oil companies, and every one of them that took me to the refinery said, "Well, now you come and you work in this refinery and you do heat transfer calculations. They're pretty boring. They're pretty easy and pretty boring." And I said, "Okay." And so Procter & Gamble came on campus and said, "We use chemical engineers. We want you to be a manufacturing manager." And I said, "What's that mean?" He said, "Well, we build these plants and then you run these plants as a manager. And we think engineers do a really good job because these are pretty technical plants." And I said, "Well, that sounds better." And they said, "Okay, well, if you'd like to do that, then we have a test that's on Saturday morning at the library and you can come and take the test." And I said, "Okay, well, nobody else told me to take a test to get a job, but okay, I'll go." So I went and I expected some easy test, and I'm sitting there and there's like 11 pages and I'm going down. I said, "This is pretty hard. This is tough engineering questions." And so I'm going through this thing. It was a year in which lots of engineers, especially chemical engineers, had lots of jobs because of the Saudi Arabia and the oil refinery thing and everything. So a bunch of people got up and said, "I got 11 job offers. I don't need this." Wrapped up the 11 pages and chucked it in the wastebasket. But I stayed and finished mine. So I don't know if I was one of the few that stayed and finished it.
Yeah.
So then they offered me a job to go to Kansas City and make little tiny bars of soap like you see in a Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
It would be little bars of Ivory soap or little bars of Zest soap.
Yeah.
So they made those little bars of soap and said, "Okay, that'll be your job." They made me an offer and I said, "Okay." And I'm ready to take it. And then I get a call from the plant manager from Kansas City and he says, "Now, Brent, I see on your resume and your application for location you have open." And I said, "Well, yeah, you don't have any plants in Colorado. So Kansas City's the closest. So, and he said, "Well, do you know that we're getting in the paper business?" I said, "No, you guys make soap." He says,
Yeah.
"No, no, we've just bought this little tiny company in Green Bay, Wisconsin called Charmin Paper Products, and we're going to get into paper." And I said, "Okay." And he says, "So if I was you, I would go in the paper side of the business." He says, "Because it's really going to boom. They're going to be building plants everywhere. And so your career path will be just much better." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he says, "So instead of doing your house hunting trip next week to come and visit us, which would you prefer to go to, Green Bay, Wisconsin or Mahoopany, Pennsylvania?" And I said, Green Bay, Wisconsin sounds cold.
Yeah.
So I'll take Mahoopany, Pennsylvania." He says, "Great. I'll talk to the plant manager out there and he'll expect you next week. You can just change your flights." And I said, "Okay." And so I hung up and I called United Airlines and I said, "Hey, at that time you could change your airline
Yeah,
without a,"
right.
so I called them up and I says, "I'd like to change my flight from Denver, Colorado, to Kansas City, to Denver, Colorado, to Mahoopany, Pennsylvania." And she says, "Do you know how to spell that?" I said, "Got no idea." She says, "Okay." So she comes back and she says, "I can't find it. Let me get my supervisor." I said, "Okay." So she gets the supervisor, and the supervisor comes back and she says, "Mr. Black, we can't fly you to Mahoopany, Pennsylvania. The closest we can get you is to the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Avoca Airport, and then you can rent a car and drive up into the mountains." And I says, "So this place is out in the middle of nowhere?" And she said, "Well, you said it, I didn't. But do you want the flight?" I said, "Yes, I guess I do." So I wound up.
Long story. That's why you were born in Tunkhannock, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? You
So
probably-
is that where the hospital was, or is that where the house was, or is that where the
Both.
plant was?
Both.
The
Oh.
town itself was not Mahoopany didn't have any traffic lights or any people at all, but Tunkhannock had one traffic light and a hospital, so we could have you born in the Tunkhannock
see.
hospital rather than the Mahoopany hospital.
Were you in the process of moving and relocating when Mom was pregnant, or did that happen after you arrived
Yeah,
in Pennsylvania?
yeah, it's after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were.
So we wound up and I got off the plane and I'm driving up to Mahoopany and I see large black clouds of smoke coming out of the ground on each side of the freeway, rolling up into the sky. And I said, "Darene's not going to like this place."
Yeah.
I said,
But she loves surprises.
It's sulfur mines.
yeah,
Gotta
it's
have
coal
the
mines
old
that are
mines.
still burning from the 1800s underneath the ground, and they can't put them out. And so,
Did they put them out now? Have we
well,
done some sort of environmental?
I wind up driving up to Maplewood, and Kansas City plant built in the after the war, like 1948 or something. But hardwood floors, they're making little bars of soap. You could eat off the floors. The place is spotless, right? Everybody's doing their job. They know what they've been doing for years. I get up there, and this is a pulp and paper mill where Procter and Gamble has never done pulp and paper before. So I get there, and there's pulp running out of the doors of the pulp mill, of the doors of the building, because they messed up some blowing of the stuff. And the place smells like sulfur and smells, it is a disaster. And I said, okay, well, I've seen this place. And so they take me down and they said, now you're a chemical engineer, right? I said, yes. And they said, we've got a thermal recompression evaporator that we got from Sweden, and nobody knows how to run this thing. So you could come in and help us start up this thing and get it running. And I said, oh, okay.
So you just use Chat GPT
Yeah.
to figure out how to,
Yeah. Well, and so I said, okay. And so anyway, we got through. I flew back home, called the guy in Kansas City, and I said, boy, that was an interesting trip. But I think the best way is to come to Kansas City and learn Procter and Gamble management techniques from people who are, like yourself, that are really know this thing, and then maybe transfer to the paper business at a later time.
Yeah.
And
So you said, let's go soap is basically
That's what he
was
said.
the
yeah. And he said, well, okay. He said, but Mr. Fuhrer, the plant manager there, he was really impressed with you. Everybody was really impressed with you, and they really want you out there.
What did you actually show them while you were there? Did you actually start doing calculations on how to get this equipment working, or
I at least knew.
or you showed up? and were
I
impressed?
showed up
That's what I'm thinking.
from
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yes.
And I
really impressed.
I
that you made it.
also knew what a thermal recompression evaporator was, whereas
okay.
most people didn't.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, he said, I'm flying out to California. He says, could I stop in Denver and come talk to you? And I said, well, sure. And he said, okay. So he flies out. I said, boy, the plant manager from Kansas City, I'm a beginning employee. He's coming out to see
It's
me.
the plant manager in Kansas City who's trying to send you to Pennsylvania
Yes.
as opposed to get you there.
Couldn't get anybody to go there.
Yeah.
And so he comes and he says, Brent, you've got a job with Procter and Gamble. We made you an offer. You've got a job.
Yeah.
He says, we wound up with a lot of chemical engineers this year in Kansas City. And he said, so rather than working in the fatty alcohol plant, which is where a chemical engineer would fit pretty good, he says, we're probably going to put you in the warehouse. And I says, oh, what does a chemical engineer do in the warehouse? He said, well, you work with the we have a union in Kansas City, and therefore you're going to be working with the Teamsters Union and the employees to make sure the warehouse runs efficiently, and you'll learn Procter and Gamble techniques. And I said, oh, okay.
So he's trying to make
threat.
Kansas City
Yeah.
less and less desirable and do everything he can to push the other one up.
So at the end I said, so you're a plant manager, but you're really a good salesman because you're trying to sell me
I'm going.
Pennsylvania. He says, I'm just telling you, Brent, if I was graduating right now, I'd go in the paper side of the business because that's where all the growth's going to be, and that's where you're going to do the best.
Do you think he was wrong?
I don't. I actually think
Yeah.
it wound up when I got there were 222 managers and 1,240 employees at that paper mill. So it was big. And then I asked, why in the world did you put it in Mahoopany, Pennsylvania?
Yes.
And they said, well, because when we got in the paper business, we went to our Whitten Hill Technical Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. We said, okay, we've talked to the ladies because Procter and Gamble has a fundamental slogan. Their philosophy, we only make products purchased by women in a grocery store that go down the drain, whether that's toothpaste or soap or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, toilet paper is purchased by women in a grocery store and goes down the drain. So they got in that business. They also started the diaper business at the same time. And so they went to Winton Hill and said,
Hamburgers.
could you please, we need toilet paper, okay? And we need you to make toilet paper that's soft. And they said, well, it's just paper. It goes out on a screen at 3,000 feet a minute, lays down, water drains out of it. We dry it, roll it up on a roll. They says, yeah, we know, but the ladies want soft. When we asked them what characteristic they wanted soft. So please make toilet paper that's soft. He said, okay. They looked at each other and said, how do we do that? So they pulled the fibers across the screen. They put a piece of Teflon fiber on the other side of it, and they pulled a vacuum to it, and they made it stand up like this. And then they rolled it up in a 4.5-inch roll, which is the biggest roll that goes in toilet paper because of the size of the toilet paper rolls. And when you put it and rolled it up and squeezed it, it was soft because all these fibers went like this. So you got Charmin and you got Mr. Whipple saying, it's squeezably soft.
We're happy about this.
Everybody was.
Yeah.
And
And they actually do less on a roll in that situation because
there's tremendously less fibers and much more air.
Yeah.
So the Winton Hill people said,
yeah.
you know your problem? It's going to be freight. You're going to be shipping this stuff in 40-foot trucks and in trains, and it's going to weigh nothing.
Yeah.
So your freight's going to be lots of volume and not much weight.
Right.
So your problem's going to be freight. And the product manager said, wait a minute, I gotta be number 1 or number 2 in the nation in a couple of years, or I get fired. So
This is the Procter and Gamble way, basically.
you need this because they're the biggest advertiser in the United States, except for the federal government, is Procter and Gamble, and they were the ones that did soap operas. They did the soap operas, right, to get on TV. Nationwide product. Not all of their soap manufacturers were regional people. They were across the country. So the guy said, okay. And they did their research. I don't know if they had ChatGPT at the time, but they said
Probably not.
a dot at Mahoopany, Pennsylvania. Draw a 150-mile radius, and you get 1/8 the population of the United States because you get New York, Pittsburgh, Boston, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. So you get all these people with this one spot. So that's the reason
All towns where Mom might have said, that sounds all right. You don't live there.
and she's only 150 miles from all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Went to New York maybe twice
Yeah.
the time we were there.
Yeah.
Not that
Was there growing up in Littleton? That was a small city, relatively. I mean, Denver's a big metropolis, but Littleton.
Not
Did
like
you ever want to go to Chicago or New York? Was there ever something, a draw of a big city? Or I mean,
not really.
Was there ever a draw of a tiny city like Tunkhannock or Mahoopany?
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know. I don't think that way. Like, where would I go or what would I do or anything?
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I never thought about New York.
Right.
And,
Okay.
So
how long then in Pennsylvania? How
5 years.
Yeah, we got there, and Darene said, the clouds come and they never disappear. So this isn't like Colorado where the clouds, it's blue sky for horizon to horizon. And she says, I don't like this. I'm going to go back west. So I was there that was the other thing. We got there and they said, well, we told all these people that there were going to be, this big plant was coming and there were going to be 1,200 employees and 200 managers. And so we thought they'd build a bunch of houses and they didn't. And we said, what does that mean? He says, there's no housing. And we said, well, we're in this little tiny motel on Route 6 or whatever. And they said, yeah, we're trying to have this guy build apartments, but you're going to have to find your own place to live. So I said, okay. So we drove around and we found a farmer and his wife had died, and their kids lived in a nice modern house on their farm 3 miles down the road, but they lived in a 12-room big farmhouse with a coal-fired fireplace where you opened the thing and poured the coal down the chute and stuff. So they rented us that because nobody else would take it, and it was a long way from the mill. And so I would drive off to the mill and leave her and Tron with no car in a 12-room house. And we had moved from a little place when we were going to college that was like 2 rooms.
A card table or an ironing board and a baby bed and a bed. I don't even think we brought a bed, did we?
I think we did.
I mean, they would move you, but we had
we didn't have anything to move.
Fun stuff. So anyway, it was, and a 10-party telephone line. Do you know when you pick up the line?
Yeah.
Somebody's
10,
already talking on it.
10 people,
What? I don't
A
understand.
landline.
So I kind
a
of
landline.
yeah, I kind of understand
share.
this, but basically you're saying it's that line is shared with 10 other people. So if they're using it, you can't use it.
Right.
And so
You can
the
pick it
way
up and hear
you
it
do it
talking.
is you go, oh, it looks like they're still using it. And then
Yes.
occasionally you pick it up and then you're like, oh, and you have a dial tone or you
Yeah,
have it passed
yeah.
to the operator.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you say I need
What? Dial.
Chesterfield 328.
It's a dial.
They
Yeah.
patch. Oh, a
But,
dial.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but it was another world.
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
but you didn't have long distance only called long distance on weekends
Right.
or after 9 o'clock.
Yeah, because it was so
So
Expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
So, you call my mom
Yeah.
on the weekends or whatever, and, you call after 9. So you're out in the, no car and
Closest
10
neighbor's 3
miles
miles
from
away.
anything.
Wow,
And
yeah.
I couldn't have walked anywhere.
What was the farm? What did they farm on this land, or did they stop farming?
Because the older people
I would
stopped
say
farming.
cattle.
Yeah, they may
They would
have
have
cattle.
Oh, okay.
One day I come home and she's kind of crying and and I says, well, so what happened? She says, I heard something down in that cellar thing, and she says I didn't know what it was, so you have that
22.
22 single shot 22 rifle, so I loaded it up and I went down there and it was gone, and then I didn't know how to unload the gun, so I shot it off. But she was basically telling me,
Yeah.
I don't have anything to do
Right.
here.
So I mean,
Might as well go out and do that.
you're crazy in the mansion, shooting the gun off in the field.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
Okay.
only time I ever got all the laundry ironed.
Well, yeah, that's what
Yeah, I'm like,
you're like,
what
I'm
else
just
do
gonna
I
get
do?
this clean. It's like I'm actually done here. I don't know what to do with myself. Yeah. So was I born while you were still in that
Oh,
in
no.
that big house?
No.
I went to HR and I said, I'm okay with the job now, but my wife is not okay. And they said, well, we're beating these people up to get the apartment building,
Yeah.
but you are not first here, so we have to give it in the line. And when I says, if you don't get me and her out of there pretty soon, if she heads back to Colorado, I'm going with her,
Yeah.
And so they said,
I
well,
didn't know you went to HR.
yeah, and I said we were working on it. Well, one of the guys overheard me, and he says, well, he says, are they going to get you? And I said, I hope so, and they eventually did, and that was better, much better for her. She was in Tunkhannock, the big town,
big-
but they had
big
one
city.
stoplight.
So when you went into HR and you talked to them, they said we're going to find another place for you, and they managed to find something that was more in town. Now you've got people around you, and so that made it a lot more palatable to
Yeah,
continue to live
yeah.
there.
And
Yeah.
she continued to say, I'd rather go back west. So I
Yeah.
immediately wrote out a thing to go.
Okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
He's saying everything like is me.
Oh, okay.
Well, I didn't care for it. Well, my employees would say about once or twice a year, Brent's going to come and say, it's a Colorado day, because there'd be
Oh,
no
okay.
clouds,
Some-
horizon to horizon,
Mhm.
which happened like once or twice a year, whereas it happens every other day in Colorado. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyway, I wasn't that fond of the weather. And when I got there, they said, well, Brent, from the time we hired you until the time you got here, uh, your employees voted in a union. And I said, what? They said, yeah, we got 1,247 employees that are non-union, and we've got your 36 employees that are union. I said, okay. And they said, yeah, it wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And I said, okay. So you need to go on shifts with all the employees and meet them all and all that stuff. And so I did that, and they, I tried to help them. They said, nope, you can't touch that pipe. You're not in our union. Well, call in somebody from overtime to do that, or call somebody else to do that. So they were very trying to flex their muscles for
So it made it much more difficult to work with.
Yeah.
But after 2 years, they actually got them out.
We got the National
Which is
Labor
almost
Relations
impossible.
Board, a previous National Relations Board director, and he came. Procter and Gamble hired him. He came. He says, "I understand you want to try to decertify this union." And the plant manager said, "Yeah, it's a score against my record." And he says, "Well, are you willing to take the time and effort it takes to do that, because it's very difficult?" And he said, "Whatever it takes." And he says, "Okay." So then he would have us go and they called it GE Bulwarianism. You went and you found out Scott Paper Company and all these other places that were unionized, and you found out what their employees made. And then you came, and the union would come up from Philadelphia, because that's where their headquarters were. They'd come up from Philadelphia, and they'd say, we need more money, and we need this, and we need that. And they'd say, okay, well, we've done our survey, and Scott Paper Company, your head operator at the boiler house, makes $8.97 an hour or whatever, and therefore we're going to give you $9.06 an hour. And they says, well, we want $10 an hour. And he says, well, you didn't get $10 an hour for the Scott Paper people. Why should you get $10 an hour? So anyway, that was the first step. And then the second step was to, he says, as soon as you get your negotiation done and you're through, he says, one thing, you get 1-year contracts, not 3-year contracts. Philadelphia guys are going to want 3-year contracts. You want a 1-year contract. He says, you get a 1-year contract. As soon as you get that done, he says, now you go to the other 1,240 employees and you give them $9.40 an hour. And the plant manager says, to everybody? He says, everybody in the plant that's non-union has to make more than the people in the union.
So this went on for 3 years, and they finally got him out. It
Right.
took a lot.
Finally got them decertified.
So
Wow.
it was a big
Yeah.
battle. They did not want to be union. So that's the whole story. That's a long.
So you had to, because you didn't have any family in the area and things like that, you really had to rely on each other, lean into each other, and you had Tron, and then eventually I came along, right? And during that time. And so when did you come to know the Lord? How did that come about for the two of you?
Well, we were really, really bored. Bored in the sense, he worked shifts and went to college, but I was really bored. And we met some people up the street. We're the blacks, they're the browns. And we went up to their house, and they brought in somebody from a church that showed us a movie about Genesis, about the Bible.
Yeah.
And I was atheistic. And he said,
yeah,
whoa.
we'll come up and mock these people if you want us to.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
And the people were very nice. They worked at the company
Yep.
also.
Yep.
And the Browns worked at the company, and
Everybody
everybody
did.
worked at
Yeah.
the company. And so we all got together, and they were very nice. And so actually, we started going to church because we were bored, and I could put Tron in the nursery.
Yeah.
A little downtime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I get it.
Appreciate
That's
that.
right.
And for me, the guy that came up, he says, Brent, you look like the typical engineer scientist. And I said, yep. He says, so facts is the only matter. And I said, yep. He says, okay, well, take this book. It's about this thick. It's by a guy named Morris. And it was the hydraulics of the flood. So I read through this thing. The formulas all matched, the whatever. And I said, there's only one problem. If this part's true, then the whole
Flood.
thing could be true. And if the whole thing's true, I'm in big trouble.
Wow. Interesting to come through the lens of sort of the science and technology. And
Yeah.
you're trying to argue math in a way,
Right.
to try
You
to
say,
get
well,
this, but if you can't.
everybody had the arguments of where'd all the water go and stuff. Well, he had every answer. He said, well, it's all up in the ice caps. And so he gave all of these rational reason and formulas for all the hydraulics of the flood. And I said, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting time. It was kind of strange. These people were very, very nice to us. We'd go to church on Sunday, and they'd feed us, and we'd, all that kind of stuff. And they were really nice people, and everything. And so we became good friends, but it was still very difficult,
It
at
was.
least for me, to believe that. I know this is insane, but I believe that if there was a God, Jesus makes sense. Does that? I don't know.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
coming and dying to save us and becoming man made sense if there was
If
really
there's
a God.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Right.
about
So they're
that.
sort of bound together.
But yeah,
But if
mine
there's
is
no God,
backwards.
then there's
Jesus was sensed, but God wasn't. You know what I mean? So anyway, after a while, we accepted the Lord, and he was baptized before I was,
And
that
then
was
when I accepted the Lord, I said, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And so I asked the guy, and he says, well, now God tells you what to do. I says, okay, how's that work? He says, well, you pray and you read your Bible, and God tells you what to do. And I said, okay, I'll think about that. And then we get this thing from Scientific Placement where I had sent this thing off years ago saying we want to go west, and they said, hey, we've got a job for you to go west. And I said, okay, well, where is it? Salt Lake City, Utah. And I said, oh, that's a little bit further west. We were thinking Denver, you know.
Yes.
And he said, well, you want to come out? And I said, okay, I'll come out. So I fly out there, and I said, I get there and I meet Larry Hill and I meet the people there, and I said, this is a little, I mean, Procter and Gamble is this $1 billion.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
a little tiny company, and you know. And so they said, yeah, you're going to become a product manager. And so they tell me all this stuff. And so I fly back and I said, nah, you know. So I get back and I said, Darren says, well, what did you think? And I said, well, it's probably not, you know, not for us. And she says, well, is that what God wants? I said, Darian, how in the world do I know? She says, so, well, okay. So I go back in my bedroom and I said, Lord, I'm supposed to ask you about this place, and I'm supposed to ask you what I'm supposed to do. So that's what I'm here doing. And he says, Ezekiel 2. And I said, Darian, is there an Ezekiel in the Bible? She says, yeah, I think it's back in that old part. And I said, okay. So I get out this Bible and I open Ezekiel 2, and it says, Son of man, stand up. I'm going to speak to you. So I immediately stood up. I read down this thing, and it's about mountains and everything. And I came out and I said, Darren, read this. So she's reading it, and I said, it sounds like Salt Lake City. She says, yeah, it does to me too. And I said, so I guess that's where he's saying we're supposed to go. And the phone rings. It's like 7 o'clock at night or something. So I reach over and I pick up the phone and I said, hi. And it says, this is Bob Thompson at IMCO. I just wonder if you were going to accept our offer. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. And he says, great. And he hangs up. And then he said, who was that? And I said, it was the personnel guy out at IMCO. And she says, well, what do you want? He says, you want to know if we were going to accept his offer? She says, what offer? I says, got no idea. And she says, well, now what are we going to do? And I says, tell you what, I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to go at 8 o'clock. I'm going to go to IMCO. I'm going to go to Procter and Gamble at Charmin. And I says, I will be back at about 8:35 because I've been through this before. If anybody quits at Procter and Gamble, they immediately have you clear out your locker, your desk, everything, take you to the gate, and they don't want you to talk to anybody else. So I said, she says, okay. So I go in and I get there and I wait a little while and I call up and the secretary and I says, is the operations manager Dick Martin available? And she said, yes, but not until 10 o'clock. And I said, okay, can I have an appointment at 10? She said, sure. I said, okay. So at 10 o'clock, I go up and I go to Dick Martin and I walk in and I said, Dick, do you believe in the Bible? And he went, I guess so. I said, great, that's going to make this a lot easier. So then I said, okay, the Lord wants me to go to Salt Lake City. It's this Ezekiel 2. So I explained this whole thing to him and he said,
Did you take your Bible with you?
uh-uh.
Oh, okay.
I said, he said, okay, well, let me talk to HR. You know, you go on back to work. So I went back to work. And pretty in the afternoon, he calls me. And he says, Brent, can you come on to my office? I said, sure. So I came up and he said, Brent, we've read this, and this is Cincinnati. And I said, Cincinnati? He says, yeah, there's mountains around Cincinnati. And we were thinking the Winton Hill Technical Center would be a good place for you. And I said, no, Dick, this is Salt Lake City. And he said, are you sure? I said, I think, yeah, I'm sure. And he said, okay. He says, would you be willing to talk to my pastor? I said, sure. He said, okay. So I went home at 5 o'clock and Darren says, what happened? I said, they don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, but I basically quit. And she said, okay, so we need to sort out what we're going to do.
But they kept him working work for weeks and weeks, and there
And
wasn't.
finally, I had to go in and I said, I have to give a 2-week notice or something. I got to go out and,
Yeah.
and they said, okay, if you can stick around for 2 more weeks, and they just thought it would go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And it didn't.
Yeah.
So we
Had
Talk
to-
to the pastor. What did the pastor
No,
say?
he didn't
didn't
ever
ever-
talk.
He never
to
got the
the
pastor to come and talk to me. And so I have a feeling if the pastor was a real pastor, he would have probably said, that's God talking to him through Ezekiel. You need to leave him alone. And
Yeah.
they may have told
Stand
Dick
up and
They may have told Dick that. And
Right,
so
right.
he said, well, that ain't going to help my cause.
Yeah.
And in fact, years later, I heard that there was a thing where a bunch of the managers, because there's 200 and some of them, were saying that they said, boy, a lot of people are quitting. Is there a problem?
Big reason.
Yeah, big reason for problem. And so the HR guy came and he says, hey, we had 3 guys that went and they came from the military, they worked for us, and then they decided to go back to the military. There was 2 others and they decided to go to graduate school. Okay. There was one guy who said God told him to go to Salt Lake City. Yeah. So they read this list, and one of the guys that was there said, hey, you got brought up the other day.
We heard about you.
Don't like
Yeah. Wow.
So that's how we wound up in Salt Lake.
In addition to working, then you also were a Gideon. When did that come about, and what does that mean? What is a Gideon?
Okay. Darene can tell you.
Yeah.
But what I basically did, I said, okay, Lord, I'm here. Now what do I do? And I said, I've read that Ezekiel thing bunches of times. And I said, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And I get this call. And the call was from the pastor of the place where Christians meet. Okay.
Yeah.
Hadn't joined that church.
Yeah.
We'd just gone there a few times.
Yeah. What church was that? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah,
It was a spin-off of
No, it was the
home plant church from the First Christian, the one that's
First
on-
Christian Church.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's First Christian
And
Church.
and so they asked if there was anybody that would, that believed in the Bible, and they had criteria. And so they gave me. He says, "Well, we got this new guy that just came. His name's Brent Black, right?" So they called me up and they said, "Hey, we're inviting you to a free dinner." And I said, "Okay, well, what's this all about?" And they said, "Well, your pastor recommended." And I said, "What pastor?" So they gave me his name, and I said, "Okay, so he thought I should come." And I said, "Yep." And I said, "Okay, then I'm coming." So I came and joined the Gideons. I said, "Lord, is this why I'm here?" So then I get in and I find out there's not very many Gideons in Utah. And so this other guy says, "Yeah, we try to do what we can." And I said, "Well, do you go down to southern Utah?" "Well, we haven't been down there in ages." And so this
A guy in a wheelchair, his name was Glenn.
Glenn Gaddis,
He
he had a travel all, and he said, "Well, if you'll go with me, I can't get out on my travel all, but I'll take you down there." So we drove down through Ephraim and Moroni and all these places, and we go in, and I'd already heard from somebody that be a good salesman. You don't ask a question where the answer is either yes or no.
Yeah. Options.
So you don't go in and say, "Would you like Bibles for your hotel?" Because the answer will either be yes or no. So you go in and you say, "How many rooms do you have?" 56. "Okay. What color would you like? Gold or blue or red?" Okay. And then they say red. And we say, "Okay, we're going to get, how many, you're going to have 56. We don't get down here very often. So our books come in boxes of 25. So we're going to give you 75. So you'll have extras in case somebody steals them. And it's okay if they steal them." And he says, "Well, how much is this going to cost me?" I says, "It's nothing. It's free." He said, "Okay, so we're going to leave these 3 boxes, and then on our way back up, we're going to pick up the used ones that you take out of the room, and you put the new ones in the room, and then you put the old ones in the box, and we'll pick them up and take them away." And they said, "Okay." So we did that.
Okay, so this is a podcast, so we get to tell them who the Gideons are and that we want them to join the Gideons.
Yeah.
Okay. So I basically found out that the Gideons were a business and professional men's group that was formed in 1898 by 2 guys who traveled as traveling salesmen, and they stayed in a room, and they were put in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, and the one guy said, "Well, I promised my mother that I would read my Bible and pray before I went to sleep." He says, "Great, that's what I promised my mom." So they
Good for
read,
mom's sake.
and so they read their Bibles and prayed, and they said, "Wouldn't it be great if other traveling guys and everything would do this?" And they said, yeah, it would be. And they said, well, we got to find some organization to do that. We'll call it traveling salesman or something. And so they got together with the third guy and they started the thing. And then they said, well, most of the hotels, the traveling guys don't take their Bibles with them. That's the problem. And so the churches said, tell you what, we'll collect the money from our congregations and we'll buy the Bibles and you place them. And they said, okay, we'll do that. So the first 25 or 50 were placed in Superior, Montana, or whatever, in like 1907 or something. And then since then, approximately 2 billion Bibles have been placed all over the world in 197 countries and I don't know, 156 languages. And so that's how I became a Gideon. And of course, as soon as I came in, they said, okay, Brent, well, you're our first new guy, so you're the president. And I said, what? And so I said, okay. And so then the Lord said, well, you can't travel all over Utah and do this, you know? And I said, okay, well, I thought Glenn and I did a pretty good job. And he said, yeah, but so I said, I went to the Idaho, Utah Gideons, and I said, I think we should form a camp in Vernal. And they said, Vernal, Utah? I said, yeah. And they said, well, it's just a little tiny town. I said, yeah, I know, but nobody goes there. And so if we're not there, nobody's going to do it because we're not doing it and Ogden's not doing it. And they said, okay. So I said, as long as you don't need any help. And I said, well, I called the guy down in Price and I said, hey, you want to meet me in Vernal, Utah? And he said, sure. And uh, I said, you know, they've got this guideline of doing all this stuff according to this book. And I said, we're supposed to go to the town and call the pastors. I said, they're not going to know whether we're calling them from Salt Lake or Vernal, you know. So I said, we'll get the list of churches. So we got these 17 churches. And we just called them up and said, hey, we're trying to form a Gideon camp in Vernal, Utah. And so we need the names of the men that you have that you are totally sure that they're following Jesus Christ, totally sure they believe in the Bible, and then you send them to this meeting. And they said, okay. So they gave us these names and we called them all. And we went to this thing and they said, you got to get 50 guys to come and then you'll get 10 to join. Well, we get there and there's like 9 guys there. And so we said, okay, and we explained everything to them. And we said, there's an application on your table, and your pastor recommended you. And so the Lord wants you to be a Gideon. So you need to sign that application. And as long as you can agree to all those things, that you believe the Bible and that you're a follower of Jesus Christ, if you do all that, then we'll take your application. So all 9 of them filled it out. And I says, okay, he's from Price. I'm from Salt Lake City. We're 120 some miles away. We're not going to be around a lot. I says, but I says, we'll start tomorrow morning. We're still going to be here in this hotel. So we'll meet in the morning at breakfast. And they said, well, okay. So we went down and what's the guy's name at Price? Anyway, he says, so what do we do? You guys appoint officers and all that stuff. I says, hey, we're not going to be, the Lord is going to appoint officers for this camp. He says, well, how's he going to do that? I says, first guy that walks through the door is a president. So this guy walks through and I says, the Lord has just appointed you president of this camp. And he says, he did? I said, yeah. I says, if you'd like, sit down and see who your vice president's going to be. And he says, well, how's the Lord going to do that? I said, the next guy through that door is going to be your vice president. And then the next guy is going to be the treasurer. So they kept walking through the door and we said, okay, you're the president, you're the vice president, you're the treasurer. Here's these guidebooks that Gideon's put out back in Tennessee. And you just follow this guidebook. If you have a question or a problem, you call me, you call him, and we'll help you as best we can. But your pastors were very, very supportive of you. And so I said, you need to ask your pastor so you can go to those churches and you can talk to them and you can tell them you're a Gideon now and tell them what you're doing. And so
No, Gideons are a group of men in each city, and hopefully, a big city, bunches of city who gather together to give out Bibles. They give them out in hotels and in hospitals, universities. We went to UVU,
jails.
junior high, the jail. So we go to the jail once a week.
Yeah.
And we give out a little New Testament. And we can't give out full Bibles in the jail generally because the jail doesn't like their hardcovers.
The hardcovers,
Yeah.
they put them in a sock and smack
They
the
might
guard up
hurt
upside the head.
True. So we kind of keep it to the small things. And in the back of most of the New Testament is a plan of salvation, how to be saved, that God loves you and he wants you in heaven. So we kind of tell the prisoners
And
each
in the front,
of these.
because they don't know much about the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
in the front somewhere,
I'll find it.
okay, is if you've got a question, it tells you the question, and then it tells you the page number, because people don't know Matthew 11:26 or something.
Sin, anger, forgiveness,
Yeah.
all of those kinds
And
of
then you
things.
go and you look it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what the Gideons give out at the universities too, and junior highs, and we're now doing in Salt Lake. We're firemen. We're going to all the fire
After
stations.
9/11, we always gave them to the military. In fact, one of the first military installations was December of 1945, just before Pearl Harbor. 45,000 testaments were passed out in Pearl Harbor just before that event. And so after 9/11, they said, well, the police and the firemen, they protect us just as much as the military does. So they authorized that. So now we can go to fire stations and to police stations.
So that, we give them out. And the one thing about the jail is that they don't have a lot of reading material. They do have a library and they do give them books. It depends on
But they
how
have a
long.
lot of time.
Yeah, they have a lot of time. That's what I was gonna say. And the ladies, at least I do the ladies, and they're just thrilled to get these, And the jailers, generally, the guys will let us go around cell to cell, depending
Even
if they're on
even if they're
lockdown.
locked down. I said,
And
well, can I just go around and tap on the window? And if they want one, they take one. If they don't want one, they don't take one. He said, sure, you can do that.
so sometimes we give out 100,
100?
150 a night,
Yeah.
depending on
Yeah. Even
which
Salt
lockdown.
Lake City, which you think is, oh, that's not a really crime city. 150 new inmates go through the jail every day.
Wow.
So in Pod C, which is where they come in, we go to Pod C. We don't go to the
Have been there.
Yeah.
where
they've
they've
been there a long time, or they're
sentenced. These
murderers.
people
right?
are in
Holding.
Yeah.
holding.
Actually,
And they don't know whether they're going to go to prison next, get released the next day, or go to the court, or they're kind of disoriented. They don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So they're
we
very
feel-
responsive to
We
these.
do take Spanish because
Yeah.
there's a lot of Spanish. In fact, the men, there's
Yeah.
a lot more Spanish.
Yeah.
So we have Spanish one,
Yeah.
and then we
Do
do
you end up
older
talking
business.
to them much or not much?
We're not. When you're doing 150 and
Yeah.
you have an hour and a half,
Yeah.
you don't
Quickly,
do. We have to be out of there at a certain time, and so we don't do a lot of talking. One of our guys go in and does a teaching thing.
And they can take them to a special room, and voluntarily they can go in that room and they can bring their testament with them, and then they can ask questions and say, what does this mean, or why does it say this, or how come I got something other than King James, or whatever they say,
Yeah.
and then that person can respond.
But we feel like, for Brent and I, that our deal is not going to teach Bible study. It's to bring them the word
Yeah.
and tell them that God loves them.
Yeah.
And here's how to find Jesus. And so we just really hand them, because we're standing there and their guard is watching, and we are proselyting in some senses, but we don't say, and what would you like to receive Christ? We
Right.
just, would you like to take this, and don't forget to read the back page and stuff.
And then we tell the pastors that after you go through this and you sign and you say, yeah, this is my personal prayer and I'm accepting Jesus Christ. We said, you can put your name in the front, but putting your name in the back is the important part. And then it says, now seek a local church. After praying, go to receive Christ. We encourage you to seek a local church or congregation or assembly that will assist you in growing as a new Christian by the faithful teaching of the Bible. So then we tell the pastors we're trying to get a new Gideon, and we say, our goal is to see if we can get them to take the word and to try to understand their acceptance of Jesus Christ. But we know your job is to teach them to grow as a disciple of Christ. So is it okay if we send people who ask us on the college campus, whatever, well, where do you go to church? No, Gideon's not a church. So, you know, where do you live? You should go to a church that's near where you live.
Yeah.
And then we asked the pastor, is it okay to send people who've just accepted Christ to your church? And we've had some that said no and some that said yes.
So we went to UVU, the one where
Charlie
Charlie is.
The Texas Gideons called and said, are you going to UVU? And we said, well, we did, but it was a long time ago. And they said, well, we think you should go now. And we said, well, they're in a kind of a turmoil. And they says, well, we'll get on a plane and fly up there and bring testaments if you'll get us on. And so I called the area director and I said, hey, this is what's happening. And I'm leaving for Yuma, but, can you, he says, well, I'll see what I could do. And I said, well, the last time we went, we did the parking lots and whatever. And then UVU is an interesting campus. One building for everything. All the buildings are connected together. So once you go inside,
But the largest college now in the in
38,700 students, bigger than BYU or University of Utah. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, one time they had us stand in the building. One time we did it off the parking lot. We did about the same. And he said, well, I'll ask for both and see what they say. And so we asked for both. They said, yep, you can do both. So
we go to churches. The only way you can find new Gideons is they have to be from churches. They have to be believers. You don't want,
and the pastor has to recommend. One of the things on the application is you give them the name of your pastor, and the pastor has to recommend you. If you don't get recommended, then you don't get to join.
Yeah.
So it's a very small number in Utah right now of Gideons, and the problem is that they're getting older and people are dying, and so we have lost camp after Provo camp.
We had a South camp, and we lost
Larry
camp.
left. He was south.
And in the South camp, a bunch of, for whatever reason, the Lord took the treasurer and the secretary and all of them, moved them to Oklahoma, moved Larry to Virginia.
So there's like 5 or 6. So everything, all of Utah, except for Ogden, is done by Salt Lake Camp, which is a big territory.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough money, and we don't have enough, mostly we don't have enough men.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are excited about giving them to the fire. They are so nice.
Yeah.
We knock on their door and we tell them we're from the Gideons and we're just here to offer them Bibles. They're a different color, but we offer them and they're very nice. And so we figure that's a good winter thing for us to be doing. So we're excited about that. And the guys are going to do that while we're gone. And
we do junior highs, and we use do you remember the Moonies? They were in Denver.
Airports.
They
kind of came out and talked to you.
Yeah.
They wore
what
white
happened?
outfits.
They would get people coming off the planes and talk to them about Mooney thing, and so the churches there said, they shouldn't do that. So anyway, they kind of started clashing with each other, and so they took each other to court. Okay, and the judge in the Denver ruled that the churches couldn't stop the Moonies, and so they said, we're getting an injunction to 10, you can't get within 10 feet of these people. So the churches, rather than quitting, they got signs that said, I'm not allowed to be within 10 feet of this Mooney guy, and I suggest you stay away further. And they just walked around with some signs. So it finally went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that in a public area, like an airport or a sidewalk or whatever, that any Jehovah's Witnesses, Moonies, anybody. So we now have that court case, and we have a letter. And so, it used to be the Congress said that there was to be a Bible placed by the Gideons on the teacher's desk. Okay.
That was it.
And eventually that got taken out. And then we put them in libraries, whatever. And now you can't almost get in a school at all. Okay. So they said we used to have a red one, and it went, and it didn't have this in it, and it didn't have these things in it. And they said it's basically a history book. That one you can take inside the school, but the other ones you can't. So we use an orange one, and we stand out and we call it a sidewalk youth testament. And so we go in and we tell the principals, there's going to be 4 or 5 guys outside, they're dressed like this, and they're going to be handing out these, and we, give them one. And they said, yeah, we understand that can you go across the street? And we said, we don't want the kids running across the street and getting hit by a car, so we'll be on the public sidewalk. And we said, I even called the city engineer, and he said, yeah, there's a little brass marker that's in the center of the sidewalk, and then there's a brass marker on the other side of the street. Between those two brass markers belongs to the city, so we can put easements in. We can put your water meter in a
right.
fire hydrant. And I said, so
Technically not on property.
yep.
then,
So
you
we
know?
said we'll be on the public sidewalk, and I says if they say no, I don't want one, we'll say fine, have a nice day, and we just hand them out. And the junior high, we decided junior highs were so much better than high schools, because high schools the kids get in their cars and and so we said we're going to do mostly junior highs, middle schools, and you'll give out 200 and some of them in about 15 minutes.
Is it when they get out and then that's
They
it?
just
Then
come
you just-
running out of, they come running out of school going to wherever they're going, and you just
Yeah.
say, hey, would you like a free New Testament? And they say, what? And I said, yeah, it's free. Did you get your free New Testament? Because I found that most people that are approaching you, okay, let's say you were out and walking and you saw somebody and you said, who's this person? What are they doing? Okay. What's forming in your mind is the word no, because you think
Did
they're
you
going
get
to
your
sell.
free New Testament? No. Here
Yeah.
it is.
And so that's the way I do it. And people will say no.
Yeah.
And then I reach my hand out again, and they reach their hand out, and they said, yeah, I guess no means that I didn't get one yet, so I
Right.
should take one. And so they take them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So we've been doing
Yeah.
Gideons since like 76,
Yep.
Mm.
I think.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we're probably right now definitely the oldest
Oh, yeah.
oldest Gideons in Salt Lake. Anyway,
Yeah.
the oldest ones in Utah for sure now. And as long length of time,
Yeah.
And we go, all of our kids are healthy right now.
Oh yeah.
And all of them now are married, and all of them talk to each other, and we have healthy grandkids. And
Now,
and
we
where's it?
pray every morning for every child and every wife of every child,
Yeah.
and then every grandchild in their family, and then now every great grandchild
Yeah.
Right.
every day.
So, but he's really blessed us. We are so blessed because, we're a little older and we don't have pains and,
Oh, you guys are so
all of that kind of stuff, and we have great kids.
Well, this
So-
is awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for listening.
Please subscribe or follow to get notified with each new episode of the Tools for Marriage podcast.
We're cheering you on.